be talking about identity fusion and negative intergroup contact. Can you join me in welcoming Angel?
Hi guys, let me begin by saying thanks to Estefania for this meeting and also for the all contact that I have had with Estefania in the last few months about internet, but it has been incredible. So thanks a lot for all your hard work. This is the first time that I'm going to present research about two of my main lines of research, intergroup contact and identity fusion. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about contact because here you can find the main experts in the world. So maybe you know about contact more than me. But what about identity fusion? Perhaps also too. But I'm going to introduce what is identity fusion and why it's important for my talk. Identity fusion is a visceral feeling of oneness with the group. For those people who are fused with the group and the self are the same thing. So personal identity and social identity are functionally equivalent. Something important is that people who are fused with a group have a strong ties with each of the members of the group. And relational and collective ties are very important for people who are fused with the group. But for me, and for us, and for all my team, the most important characteristics of identity fusion is that predicts extreme behavior and pro-group action. For example, we have evidence that identity fusion predicts fire and die for different groups. We have tested this prediction in different countries, even in Germany with Oliver too, in a study that we did in the 5 continents. But this behavior can be positive or also negative. Identity fusion also predicts personal responses to the trolley dilemma in different scenarios. So for example, when people have to respond very quickly about what to do, if they want to sacrifice for members of the group or not. But identity fusion also predicts behaviors, like for example, being very quick or being very fast in a video game where people have to play and have to respond to a task where the avatar of the game belong to the ingroup or not. And in particular, after doing a sport and being activated. And also, perhaps the most important behavior that we predicted is a real behavior, is the change that transsexuals made 2 years after going to the first interview when they decided to do the change of the gender. And also we have found evidence for people who are fused with a group in particular scenarios of the real life, as for example, in different neighborhoods in Tetuan and Casablanca, where there are people who have been terrorists, and also in Iraq with fighters and members of the Islamic State in a paper that we published a couple of years ago. So if we think that identity fusion predicts extreme behavior, it makes sense to think that in general, control conditions, strongly fused individuals should display negative attitudes, willingness to fire and die, and aggressive behavior to our group members, as well as less helping behavior. And also, positive contact should reduce this effect, while negative contact should increase this effect. Perhaps you agree with these predictions, but maybe not. Maybe different things could happen. Why? Because people who are fused with the group are more worried about what happened inside the group, not about intergroup relations. When there is not a threat, there is no reason to fight against other groups. So this is what we wanted to test. I'm going to introduce 5 experiments. Don't panic, I will be very, very fast. And also, I know that Estefania would like to see 1 experiment manipulated at the same time, positive and negative contact. But we already have 5 experiments. We don't have time for more, right? But we will do it in the future, don't worry. So the first study was just to see the relation between identity fusion and different measures of intergroup contact, the classic measures: quantity of contact, quality of contact, prior cross-group friendship, and extended contact. Because our prediction was that identity fusion should be unrelated with all of these measures, because people who are fused with a group don't need to have a negative contact or don't need to avoid contact with other groups. And we conducted 2 preliminary studies with 2 different outgroups, Immigrants and Gypsies, a very relevant group in Spain. And we measure fusion with the country, negative attitudes toward the outgroup, and also fight and die for the country, because we wanted to see if there is no relation with contact measures, but relation with fight and die, as in previous studies. And this is what we found in the two studies, considering Gypsies and Immigrants. So as you see, identity fusion is mostly unrelated or very low related with all the measures related to intergroup contact. However, there is a positive and a strong relation with fight and die for the group. So this is only two correlational studies, but to show the relevance of the relation between identity fusion and the other variables. So in the first experiment, we wanted to manipulate positive and negative contact in different conditions and compare contact with a control condition. We measure all the variables, all the possible variables about intergroup contact, quantity, quality, etc. Also negative attitudes about immigrants or against immigrants, and the manipulation check. And we did two dummy codes to do the analysis to compare control with the positive and control with the negative condition. And the main finding, and the most important, is that positive contact is good for weakly fused, but not for strongly fused. However, negative contact is bad for strongly fused. So depending on the level of identity fusion, they react differently to the positive or the negative contact, right? And this is what we expected. Under control condition, there is no reason to have a negative attitude toward the outgroup, at least for strongly fused. Then we wanted to see what happened with another strategy of contact, is depersonalized extended contact. Miles Houston, Linda Trop, and my colleague Alexandra knows well, because we published our first paper last year. It's a type of contact, a type of indirect contact, where people only know that other members of your group have a contact with the outgroup. So there is no direct contact, there is not extended contact, but we found that this is a good strategy for improving intergroup relations. The idea was to check whether the same effect of positive and negative extended contact, depersonalized extended contact, had the same effect for weakly and strongly fused. So we replicated exactly the same study, but changing the manipulation and using depersonalized extended contact instead of direct contact. And we found exactly the same effect. For those that don't remember the result of the first study, this is the figure. So you can see that there is no problem and the manipulation is different, but the result is the same. So we have replicated that strongly fused are not concerned about what happened in the control condition, and there is nothing happen when there is a positive depersonalized extended contact, but when there is a negative extended contact, depersonalized extended contact, the result is exactly the same. And direct and depersonalized extended contact is very relevant for identity fusion theory, because there are two kinds of identity fusion, local and extended. Local is with those people that you know directly, as members of your family, your friends. And extended contact is when you don't know to most of the people as people from your country, for example. So it makes sense to compare the effect of direct contact and depersonalized extended contact. And now in the next two studies, I'm going to focus on another variable that for us is very important, is fight for the group. Okay, they are going to have a negative attitude toward the outgroup in the negative contact conditions, but are they willing to fight for the group? So what we did was to use only the control and the negative contact condition, the manipulation check, negative attitudes. I'm not going to present the result for the negative attitudes in this study and also in study 4, but the results are exactly the same that in the other two studies. But we wanted to focus on fight and die in general and against the outgroup, because they should increase fight for the group when the outgroup is the source of the threat. In this case, negative contact, but not in general, because fused individuals are not crazy. So what we found, as we expected, is fight in general, there is only a main effect of fusion, but not an interaction with the manipulation. However, there is an interaction in the case of fight against the outgroup, and the interaction is significant. What we did was try to replicate exactly the same design, but with depersonalized extended contact. We found the same main effect for fight in general, only strongly fused individuals are more willing to fight for the group, and the interaction. And also, as happened with the other case, you can see that the effect is exactly the same. So we have demonstrated that positive and negative contacts have different consequences for weakly and strongly fused. There is an effect on negative attitudes. There is an effect on fight against the source of the threat of the negative contact, but not fight in general. But what about behavior? So we conducted a last experiment focused on behavior. I have to say that in all of the studies, we controlled for the different kind of contact. And we only found a main effect of the quality of contact, but not for the other. But in any case, all the results emerged even controlling for these measures. And in the last study, we only included one outcome measure, in particular, one behavior. I don't know if you know this task. It's a task for measuring helping behavior and also aggressive aggression. Participants learning that they have to do a task with a member of an outgroup. And at the end of this task, they can assign 11 tangrams to the other participants. And there's going to be a prize, 25 gift voucher. So they had to assign 11. They had to align 11 options, easy, medium, and hard. So the idea was to see how many tangrams they assigned to the outgroup. We predicted that strongly fused with the group, they will assign more difficult tangrams and less easy tangram than weakly fused. And in the case of helping, we found that strongly fused in the negative contact condition, they were less helping to the outgroup, and the opposite effect was found for the aggressive behavior. I presented the two figures because the two measures are independent, so it's not exactly the same or just the opposite. Then we think that we have some contribution for intergroup contact literature. This is just a summary. Fusing with the group is one of the factors, maybe there are more, that moderate the effect of the balance of intergroup contact. And also there is a lot of contribution for identity fusion theory. In particular, fusion moderates the effect of contact on intergroup orientation, different effect for strongly and for weakly fused. So this is a test for us demonstrating that identity fusion is focused on intra-group relation more than in intergroup relation. And intergroup relation only makes sense or make particular sense when there is a threat. So those who are fused with a group are not crazy people. I am convinced that all of you are fused with one group, at least with a family, right? And also the effects are replicated with different groups, with different outgroups, considering immigrants or gypsies, with different contact strategies, and also controlling for previous dimensions of contact. For us, it's also relevant because we have introduced two new outcome measures to the literature about identity fusion. Is outgroup, in particular, negative attitudes toward the outgroup, and also a real behavior where we can see whether they are more willing to help or being more aggressive. And also this is the first time that we modify the fire and die scale focus on the group. So they have to do something against the outgroup. And that's all. Thanks a lot.
Okay, do we have any questions?
Thank you for your very interesting talk. I was wondering, how did you assess the control condition in the first two experiments? Because for me, it seemed like for negative and positive contact, you just find a difference for the interception. So there was no interaction. However, with the control condition, there was. So how do you assess that? Because identity fusion seems to have only this, there's only this interception effect for negative and positive contact, but no interaction.
Yes, for example, in the same case, in the same way that for the positive and negative contact condition, they have to report a real contact that they have had with members of the outgroup. In the control condition, they have to report what did you do yesterday, or what did you do yesterday, or in the way to the university or to your work or something like that. So something that is not relevant. And in any case, we checked all the responses to the participants to say, to see if someone reported something related with contact with this outgroup, but no one reported anything about that. So it was the same task for weakly and strongly fused.
But why do you find this interaction only for the control condition, not for the negative and positive contact? Do you have any idea?
Sorry, I think that I don't understand.
For me, it seemed when I looked at the slope, that the slope for negative and positive contact was exactly the same. The only difference was that there was a difference in intercept.
Yes, what happened is that we think that for weakly fused, the control is similar to a negative because they expect a negative, I mean, when we consider negative attitudes toward the group, toward the outgroup. In the case of weakly fused, the control and the negative condition is more or less the same. However, for strongly fused, the control and the positive is the same because they don't have any reason for having a negative attitude toward the outgroup. If they don't have a particular relation with them and there is not a threat, there is not negative. However, in the case of weakly fused, perhaps because they are more threatening or something like that, it's something that we have to explore. But we did these studies because we thought that this is what it was going to happen. If you have seen in any of the 5 experiments, we have included any mediator. So we know what happened, and we think we know why this happened, but we have to explore what is happening. At least here we have presented the evidence of the effect. Now we will have to deep into the consequence and the explanations of these effects.
This one up the back.
Hi, thank you for a wonderful talk. Maybe I've missed it, but how do you measure this identity fusion? Is that related to the identity other overlap or individual other overlap to this IOS scale?
Yeah, there are 3 measures of identity fusion. One of them is pictorial, the other is pictorial biodynamic, and here we use the verbal measure of fusion. It's 7 items, and for example, one item is the group is me. I make the group stronger. It was published 8 years ago.
Thank you.
We probably have time for a final question if anyone has one. Although I'm aware there will be a lot of time to talk over drinks tonight. Can you please join me in thanking Angel?